Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me. Today is a difficult day. We often wish each other joy and happiness and fulfillment. And there's a kind of generosity in that. And I think it's a very old tradition. But it's one of those traditions that arises from gaps having been imposed, intervals between us. It's one of the traditions that arises from not being together. Because when we are together all the time, we don't have to wish each other things. We directly provide them to each other. Instead of wishing people joy or health or prosperity, we bring directly to their lives joy, food, warmth, comfort, love, prosperity, care when we are sick or injured. Instead of having to purchase those things from institutions, corporations, hospitals, doctors, dentists, and so on. And this latter circumstance, the having to purchase these things, does not result in these things. You cannot purchase health. You cannot purchase comfort. What you get is an approximation, or you get some momentary relief. You cannot purchase the blessing of a family, or an extended family, or an allo family. An allo family is a family that adopts us and we adopt them outside our family of origin, right? And these things are great blessings. Allo families are really important for human happiness and health and joy, and to live a fulfilling life. Today is a very troubling day. It is not joyful. And to be honest, I've had many very troubling days. I generally don't use social media to speak about my own life or struggles or needs or suffering or confusion. I use it like my journal, like the journal of my philosophical, intellectual, and creative growth. And there are a number of reasons why I do not discuss my personal life much at all on the internet or in videos. I think it's a very dangerous thing to do. There's all kinds of reasons that it's dangerous. There are various forms of opportunism that can take advantage of personal details that we volunteer. And of course, there's the problem of the analytics we generate, and that someone once asked me, what do you mean by analytics? And this person was a coder, and someone I respect their intelligence. And I said the details of our electronic communications, activity, behavior, what we look at, what we don't look at, that can be used to produce profiles of us by corporations, bad actors, enemies, opportunists, predators, and so on. And so it's not that I think, oh, I am in some great danger. I'm not a very attractive target, right? I don't really have anything that anyone wants. There might be some exceptions in that I might have ideas that could be dangerous to the status quo. And in that sense, I might be understood as some kind of a dissident or something, but I'm not particularly paranoid about it. I just practice caution. I mention these things just by way of talking about my moment in the world and today in my life. You know, people have wished me beautiful things. I just met a couple who were very charming, Ilya and Kate. I'm saying their names to help me remember them. We had a wonderful exchange. That was very joyful. But when I went into a restaurant earlier with my mask on to get some food, the waiter, who's known to me, we're friendly with each other, he wished me a happy new year. And he doesn't know what's going on in my actual life. And I'm not going to talk about it here, but I promise you, it's nothing like happy. In fact, it's very unhappy today. Now, again, this was not my intention to speak about this matter today. However, it is my intention to speak about the character of time and a very peculiar feature of time that, while some of us are trivially aware of, we ordinarily ignore, at least until a crisis of some kind emerges. I have to set my phone down for a moment so that I can avoid the crisis of tripping over my own shoelace, or try to avoid it, which is an analogous crisis of various kinds of problems with our minds. This is the second day of Gatoi in the Blackfoot moon calendar. This is the food sharing moon. It is usually late in the winter. A long time ago, it is late in the winter and the stores of food have run out. And so now, long ago, for the people who live in frozen places, in our particular part of the world, or in a part of the world near us, they must depend upon each other for survival. The people who have stored more food than those who have run out must share their food. And people have to be generous and not selfish, or many people will starve to death or die of illness. This is a hardship moon. The winter may be coming to a close, but we have to get through the next moon cycle or two together to survive. And some of us will not see the next moon cycle. Gatoi. K-A apostrophe for the glottal stop, T-O-Y-I-I. In Blackfoot. Or Nitsitapi. I can't pronounce it correctly. My Italian tongue was made for other dances. My half French, half Italian tongue. So the other day, I was speaking with my friend in the evening, my friend Nathan. I'll pause for a moment while the siren is raging. And I said to him, you know, our values and our value systems, they depend on an underlying variable, which is how much time do we suppose we have? Because if we were to suddenly realize that we have, and of course there are many authors and writers and so on, dramatists have explored this problem or situation aspect of our nature in stories. If, for example, we were to learn that a large asteroid was about to strike the Earth, and that most, if not all of us, would die, our values would immediately change quite dramatically. And something would be revealed about each one of us and our cohorts, that many things would be revealed that we had previously not seen. Of course, that would be a very dangerous situation, because many people would probably react quite violently, but not everyone. Some people would want to, well, we'd have the same kind of problem, right? We'd have rampant opportunism, rape and pillaging and so on. A lot of violence and crime from some people. But other people would want to have experiences of beauty, or to show great kindness or love to other people. So it would be a very confusing mess. Some people would simply be terrified and hide. All kinds of different people would do all kinds of different things. And they would do things we can't imagine. Because our imagination isn't equal to a situation that catastrophically impactful on our value systems. Now, my friend Nathan remarked, and I was quite gratified to see him displaying a sense of humor. And all I said was, you know, if the time we had were suddenly, the time we expected to have left was suddenly much shorter than a futurity that we normally imagine, all of our values would change. And of course, this happens all the time because either people receive injuries that will end their life, or could, or they have strokes or heart attacks, or they have an encounter with death, or they have a terrifying injury that changes their life, or they are diagnosed with a lethal disease and given some kind of, you know, time frame in which, you know, they can imagine trying to do the things that we save up to do when we retire, right? Such a ridiculous word. The things that we hope to do, that we work for the freedom to do throughout most of our lives, many of us, though some people live, you know, for the now and in the day. Others of us work very hard all the time in hopes that a time will come in our future where we can then enjoy the sort of the fruits of our labor, as it's called. Most of us don't really live to enjoy those fruits, and if we do, the world may have changed or transformed in such a way that it becomes either impossible or unlikely to do so. My friend Nathan, of course, all I said was, time changes our sense of importance, and he said, yes, but I wonder what it does to our sense of exportance. Now, you can think of the port part as literally a port where ships arrive, which is where a boundary or a membrane gets crossed, like a cellular membrane or the membrane of our bodies that gets crossed by weapons or lovemaking. In lovemaking, we soften the boundary of our body to receive and to be received by others. Right? People exchange their tongues and their mouths and things, yeah? In effect, exploring the inside of another's body with our own body, and having the inside of our body explored and felt and sensed and exchanged with another's, body. Softening of the membrane. The membranes of our cells are crucially important boundaries. But there's another aspect of this idea of importance, which is the idea of a portent, right? An indication of future transformations, yeah? Changes. I think both ideas are important. But the primary thing that I want to highlight today, and I don't have as much time as I might like, is that all of our value systems, almost all of them, perhaps not all, but many, most, yeah, I'm not a fan of absolutism, let's call it many of our values, intrinsically depend on something we don't examine when we think about our values and what we want to do and get and buy and have and be protected from and share and selfishly hoard and all of these things. And the fundamental variable that all of those things emerge from is the idea that we have a future. A future is a strange thing because it's not a thing. It is an imagined interval that we ordinarily, until we're threatened or until we're sort of shocked out of the trance of it, we ordinarily imagine it as having infinite extent. Yes, of course, we know we will die. Everybody dies someday, but not today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, not next year. Yet some of us will be dead within the next 5 minutes. Right? Some of us, our lives will end immediately, unexpectedly. And others of us will live much longer, but everybody's life will end. And we will, while we still live, have various encounters with death, as if we are becoming familiar with something that we all must eventually experience by being slowly exposed to it, hopefully, or by being suddenly exposed to it in ways that can be enlightening or traumatic or devastating, and so on. During the COVID pandemic, I do not know all that many people very well. There are perhaps 50 people in my circle, wild guess here, with whom I have some kind of meaningful relationship or connection. And perhaps 25 or 30 of them I'm fairly close with, and then there's a much closer circle, and then there's the very intimate circle. Right? A number of those people have been severely impacted by the pandemic. And there's a bunch of people running around saying like, well, you shouldn't get vaccinated. It's really dangerous. It's some kind of a conspiracy or whatever. And I have compassion for these people's ways of thinking. And in fact, I can understand them myself. I have suspicions about the vaccine, and I mistrust it. But then you have the people who actually get COVID. And many of those people simply die. Not everybody, but a goodly number of them. There is a story from my friend Surov in India, where he spent days driving around to try to get a pint of blood for his mother as she was dying of COVID. And 2 people in his family died. And in speaking with some friends that I game with online, often in the evenings, out of a group of 5 people, 3 of them had stories where an immediate family member perished because they got COVID. Within days, that person was gone. Now, it's not entirely clear that the vaccine would have saved all of those lives had they been vaccinated, but it would have likely saved many of them. A good percentage. Let's say 7 out of 10. Those people would still be alive and with their families. One of the things that the onset of the pandemic does is change the meaning of time. And part of how it changes the meaning of time is by introducing a deadly contagion to the world population. Now, the deadly contagion affects each person and each people differently. It doesn't affect everyone exactly the same. But nearly everyone who gets vaccinated will have a far less chance of dying of COVID. Now, will the vaccine harm those people? Depends on kind of what you mean by harm. There may be some terrible secret we discover in the future about this. It's not very likely. It doesn't look conspiratorial on the surface. In fact, what looks conspiratorial on the surface is the PSYOP war that's going on, where if you can get a country's people to doubt the vaccine, you can kill millions of them without even bringing a weapon to the table, right? If you can just get some country's people to form opinions and conspiracy theories and so on, then millions of them will die and you won't even have to point a gun at them. And you'll fuck up their supply chains, you'll fuck up their economies, all kinds of things will happen. But it wasn't my intention to talk about COVID and the vaccine today, and yet it's not impossible, it's difficult to separate the 2 topics entirely, because the onset of COVID and the onset of the possibility of vaccinating people against it, both of these things have radically transformed the human experience of time, because they both modulate the proximity of death. And that's the actual variable that underlies nearly all of the invisible variable that underlies all of our values. If I were to know for a fact that I was going to be killed or die in a week, I would want to do very special and different things than I would ordinarily do, and I would not care a bit about money, possessions, my house, my car, my machines, my computers, my clothing, all of these things. I would not care about the material things. What I would care about is spending deeply meaningful time with people that I love in the time that I have left, and places that I love, and animals that I love, and the living places, the ocean, the sun, the moon, the stars. This is what would be important to me, and some other things too, to atone for wrongs I had done during my life, to commit acts of bravery, kindness, rescue, all of these kinds of things would become important to me. And they are important to me in my daily life too, but not to the same degree as if I were to discover that I was soon to die. And so what I want to make very clear is that the entire catalog, the whole continuum of our value system, is founded on something we very rarely have the opportunity or awareness to examine. What is that thing? It is how much time we think we have left, and that is the ultimate commodity. That's the commodity that determines the value of all other commodities. How much time is there? And it's weird that we think of time in quantities, because the actual nature of time is not, it's not the kind of thing you can divide into slices like a pie, 60 seconds per minute, 60 minutes per hour, 12 hours, 24 hours per day, so many hours per week, so many hours per month, so many per year, so many per lifetime, so on. Though we can impose those intervals, those slices, on our thinking about time, the actual nature of time is very weird and not like our models that imply regularity and universal regularity. Even though those models, we know how to work them and we are familiar with them. The interval between the birds' chirps is not precise. And intervals in nature are almost never precise. Though, in our quest for precision and repeatability, we have located certain atomic phenomenon that repeat with great but not perfect regularity. Extremely precise, extreme precision, maybe 40 decimal points or something of precision, but not infinite decimal points of precision. Not perfect. Most living phenomena, I think. I always get this wrong. The plural of phenomenon. Most phenomena have regular cycles, but they're not perfectly regular. They vary. And they vary in part because their regularity is the product of relationships with other cycles and phenomena. But fundamentally, and I want you to consider this very deeply, to take a moment after you listen to the video and think very carefully and feel very carefully into yourself about the nature of time and the brevity of our lives. And think and wonder and try to understand, if you were given a very short time to live, what values would you choose to embody and enact based on the sudden disappearance of a seemingly infinite future? And of course, we should all recognize that in our youth, especially in childhood, the future certainly seems profoundly infinite. We cannot imagine being as old as our grandparents when we are 5. It doesn't even seem possible or plausible. Our experience of time when we are young, especially when we are children, is profoundly unique in our lifespan and very unlike the experiences of time we will have during different life phases. And I want us to imagine, when I speak of the idea of life phases, not like 3 of them. It's not like child, teen, adult, right? We probably undergo, wild guess here, 7 to 9 life phases between birth and being 12 years old, if we use a metric like that. I mean, if we want to get much more detailed, we could probably find 40 or 50 life phases in that one span. And if we want to be extremely detailed, we could find 1,000 life phases in a lifetime. A long lifetime. Say 70 years, if that's long. So within each life phase, our felt sense both of time itself and of how much time is left transforms. And as we reach a certain age, something in the value system tends to flip over, right? We begin to realize, oh shit, the future is no longer infinite. We start to recognize the proximity of death, and this transforms the way that we are in the world and in our minds and in our hearts. As this recognition begins to, I'm not going to use the phrase dawn on us, it begins to sunset on us, right? It's the opposite of dawning. As the infinitude of time sets in our experience and thought and felt sense of being alive. And this will happen to every single one of us if we live to, say, 30 or 40 or beyond, right? We will have the experience of the sun of the infinite future setting and us realizing, holy shit, night is coming. The time when there is no life left for me is coming, right? And this is a very profound realization, and we may not have it consciously. And this is part of what contributes to things that we refer to as midlife crises and similar kinds of psychological disturbances and emotional disturbances, because most of us have lived our whole lives essentially with the idea of a probably infinite future. Even if we have lived relatively recklessly, we still have had, some modest number of encounters directly with the probability or possibility of death. And so most of us imagine an infinite future, or something resembling that. But eventually in life that flips over, and we realize, oh, there's not so many years left. Even if I live long, I'll not live so many years. And as we have the habit of having lived our lives, many of us anyway, as if there's an infinite future, our values change dramatically. They begin to change. And this can be a very troubling time. It can also be a very liberating time. It sort of depends on how we are in the situation and how we play with the variables and our nature and our character and our life scripts and so on, various features of our psychology during these events. But fundamentally, what I hope for you to understand is that we should reevaluate our value systems by comparing them to the immediate proximity of death. And if we will do this regularly, our value systems and the way that we are in the world and our mind, our priorities, will radically transform, and probably in a very good way. Because the fairy tales, the bad kinds of fairy tales that our modern culture imposes on us, ridiculous nonsense that's deadly and toxic, about commodities and success and money and all of these things, none of this matters when you die. In fact, it does matter a great deal. Well, the way that it matters is it has stolen our lives from within our very lives by creating a facade of fake values, that are meaningless in the face of death, except, but when I say meaningless, they're not meaningless. They're egregiously toxic in the face of death, right? They steal our lives from us day to day, so that at the moment of death, we will have great regret at what we have not been, done, seen, related with, rescued, adored, been loved by, and so forth. And these are the things that more or less matter for human beings. And if we are more than human, which I say that we are, there are very special things that matter. The liberation of our essential being from the traps of representational cognition in modern culture is one of the things that matters. Showing great care and generosity and kindness to other beings who are suffering is another thing that truly matters, it seems to me. And rescuing beings who are in crisis or travail, who have no help and are helpless or hopeless or have lost their faith, returning the hope and faith and reassurance and comfort to these beings, this seems to me to be very fucking important. Now, from one perspective, from a perspective of emptiness that we might associate with something like the Vedas or Buddhism, none of this really matters. It's all a charade. But it's not really true. We have hearts, and our hearts, I don't mean the organ, right? I mean the essential sense, right? The sense of heartfulness. To this aspect of us which I trust, kindness and generosity, mutual compassion and care, mutual aid, sharing food, giving comfort, working with the sick and dying, working with those who are struggling to be born or to heal. All of these things matter. And they matter whether or not we have infinite time or just a little bit. It is often said that on deathbeds, what is often regretted is what was not done in our life. And certainly I will know some of the sting of that. Perhaps we all will. Presuming that I get a chance to sit around and wonder about it. Many of us die very suddenly, and there's no chance to contemplate the life. At least not while we are still alive. I have good reason to believe that after the experience of physical death, there is at least an interval during which our, whatever we might refer to as the mind, it continues on. There's at least an interval in which that mind continues on. And so some kind of reflection may be possible. However, I suspect that most of what is going on there, for many of us anyway, unless we have practiced death in some specific way, is great confusion. We are confused. Why do I seem to feel I still exist, even though clearly my body is dead? Right? Something like this. But these things are unknowable. I have suspicions about them from encounters with death that I've experienced during my life. And I also suspect that each person's actual experience of dying and of the post-death interval or intervals is at least modestly unique, if not very unique. Each of our births is unique. Probably each of our deaths is unique, right? Even though all of us were born into the world, it had a very different meaning for each one of us, what that meant, right? Especially over a lifetime. Finally, I guess I will say that I have the other suspicion that dreaming is in some way practice for death. Every night we dream, we fall asleep. It's a little bit like dying. The waking mind certainly mostly dies. And so it seems to me that perhaps the experience that we refer to as, or the vast array of experiences, of distinguishable experiences that we refer to with the single word dreaming, those are ways of practicing for death, perhaps. But think carefully about value systems and their relationship to your imagined interval of the future. Shrink that interval down and decide what is important and pay some attention to that decision, because if you needed a compass for what was meaningful in life, this is probably one of the best ways to build one, right? Imagine that you have to die soon. Now what is important? Yeah. And you don't have to pursue anything particular, but I guarantee that if you deeply reflect on this, what you will see as valuable will transform, and the more that you reflect on this, the more it will continue to transform. Thank you for joining me today. Of course, I wish you every blessing and joyful success in all the aspects of your life. But let us do more than wish for each other. Let us be the joy, the comfort, the aid, the reassurance, the love, the assistance, the feeding, the housing, the encompassing for each other in our day-to-day lives, so that we may live lives connected to love and wonder and joy and creativity this day and all our days.